Luffy versus Usopp. This is always a painful one to talk about, but at the same time this really was a defining event in the series for both contenders, crafting a rift in their friendship that culminated in a full-on fistfight. This bout stands out quite a lot because it's one of the very few battles in which it was not satisfying in any way to see Luffy land a blow on his opponent. Like, this wasn't Arlong where every punch was this joyous release, it was quite the opposite actually. Every hit that landed courtesy of either Luffy or Usopp only made this situation hurt that much more. And that dramatic weight is conveyed so effectively through Luffy at the conclusion of the clash, where even though he technically came out on top, it was clear that there were no winners in this situation. But despite it being one of the more painful events in the series to watch or read through, it was still put together masterfully from an aesthetic point of view, so oddly enough, it was still great to see, whilst being simultaneously torturous. A truly outstanding Luffy fight, without a doubt. Number 4. Luffy versus Bluno. Alright, so this fight always takes me back to high school, because back in the day I would rewatch this fight over and over and over again. And in fact, you know what, to this day it is probably the fight that I have rewatched the most. Because the moment this episode aired, I was stunned because I was waiting to see how Gear 2nd would be animated, and it absolutely floored me. The speed in this altercation was like nothing the series had seen before, and Luffy's hits felt so incredibly devastating. Plus, narratively, this conflict had a lot of substance to it, as it was essentially the turn of the tide for the Water 7 saga, which up until this point had been incredibly dark and despairful. I mean, CP9 were this group of unfathomably powerful figures at the time, and watching Luffy rise to their level and bring down the Cowman meant everything. It signaled that this counterattack was in full swing and that the rest of the Straw Hats were also going to rise to the occasion. Plus, even though it occurred during Enies Lobby, which was a notable period in which the anime started to decline, this was still put together phenomenally from start to finish. In fact, I'd have to say that the only thing this clash has going against it is that it does end somewhat anticlimactically, with Bluno just eventually collapsing from the jet bazooka damage. But that really is the only thing I could even come close to calling a flaw in this incredible exchange. Number 3. Luffy versus Rob Lucci. Sticking with Enies Lobby for now, we have the main event, which brings us everything that the new fresh concept of Gear 2nd did in the Bluno fight, but adds the emotional weight of Robin and even Usopp behind it as well, in much the same way that Arlong was carrying the weight of Nami, just like on steroids. And to this day, I think that Luffy versus Lucci is one of the most brutal slugfests we've ever seen in the series. This wasn't a fight between weird paramecia powers or having to come up with a creative way to counter a Logia user. This was almost entirely pure brawn, and could only be decided by way of whose endurance gave in first. Plus, in terms of spectacle, this was the first properly seen use of Gear 3rd in the series, which was portrayed superbly, and the final attack is easily one of the greatest finishes we've ever been privileged enough to witness. Jet, Gatling, gun. What a way to end everything. And full credit to the anime, in both the original series and the episode of Mary, for making this one hell of a moment to remember. Number 2. Luffy versus Crocodile, Round 3. So I'll say this straight up. This is the fight that convinced me that I was going to be a lifelong fan of the series. Everything up until now had been great, but the climax of the Alabasta Saga was a high point in One Piece that has been so incredibly hard to replicate going forward. Not impossible to replicate, and not even impossible to surpass, but this fight just had everything going for it. To begin with, it was the first time that Luffy had really been pushed to his limits. Compared to this fight, everything before it looks like a comfortable victory for him. But this was Crocodile, and he'd already lost to this man twice. A man who still reigns as one of the most popular villains within the series' history, with an incredible design and presenting an impossible power to overcome. But as always, Luffy rose to the occasion, confronting him for a third time, and even using his own blood as a counter to Crocodile's low-gear powers. This fight was brutal, it was desperate, and it was series defining, when after all of this, Luffy exclaims that he would surpass Crocodile and punched him into absolute infinity through bedrock and beyond, saving not only the kingdom of Alabasta, but also his dream of becoming the Pirate King. From start to finish, this battle is engraved in my mind, and yet I should point out that we still haven't quite reached the pinnacle of Luffy combat. Number 1. Luffy versus Katakuri. Alright, so despite being the number 1 place, this is a bit of a weird one, because when I was reading this fight weekly, I was a bit hot and cold on it, as you can tell if you rewatch my chapter reviews. On the one hand, I loved the artwork and the choreography, and in that respect, I think that this battle stands out as one of the greatest in all of Shonen, let alone One Piece as an individual series. What I didn't like at the time was, well, the time. It took an awfully long time to complete, reading weekly, and there were points where it just didn't feel like it was getting anywhere. But in retrospect, that was very much the point. The idea was to showcase Luffy in an extended bout, getting crushed every step of the way in pursuit of acquiring a new skill and eventually trumping his opponent, not through strength, but through sheer force of will. And a lot of people will argue with me about this, but to this day, I believe that Luffy could not have won this fight with power alone. Katakuri trumped him in every aspect, but what Luffy managed to do was so much more impressive than simply beat an opponent. Luffy managed to change Katakuri's entire being during this fight and flip his way of life on its head, simply by refusing to give up against an opponent who clearly outclassed him. And yeah, I know it's not quite as simple as that. That's why I have a whole video explaining this fight, which you should absolutely check out. However, there has never been anything like this in One Piece before, and I highly doubt that we'll ever see anything like it again. This transcends the concept of a fight by entwining physical and psychological combat. Physically, Luffy lost, but psychologically, he won. And of everything on this list today, this display is what makes me truly believe that Luffy will one day, against all odds, become the Pirate King. And that pretty much does it for the top 10 Luffy fights in One Piece. If you enjoyed this video and the content this channel produces in general, then please do consider donating to the Grand Line Review Patreon, because the support of all of you amazing people is what continues to make this channel possible. And if you'd like to see more videos like this but apply to other anime and manga series, then please do check out my second channel, New World Review, for all of your wider needs. And if you'd like to join the fun at any time, then please do head over to my Discord server, where a wide array of shenaniganry takes place on a daily basis. And finally, please do comment with your own favorite Luffy fights in the series. This has been the Grand Line Review, and I'll see you next time.